What if a single October night, in the year 1987, deep in the black woods of Raven Hollow, 13 teenagers gathered for a Halloween game that would bind their names to death itself? Beneath the swollen harvest moon, they lit bonfires, carved grinning pumpkins, and whispered chants older than the soil they stood upon. By morning, their bodies were found in a circle of ash and bone. One survived, and their silence has haunted the town for decades. If you dare walk with us into the hollow, into firelight and shadow, then linger, subscribe, and join this covenant of stories, where we exhume the forgotten, awaken the restless, and never return unscarred. Raven Hollow, 1987. The town was dressed in costumes and cheap plastic masks, its streets flickering with the glow of jack-o'-lanterns. Children ran shrieking between doorways, their laughter mingling with the cold bite of October air. The adults lingered in porches with mugs of cider, trading warnings and half-believed stories about the woods to the north. Every year the tales returned, like rot blooming fresh in the soil, of shadows that did not belong, of voices that called from between the trees, of games whispered by older brothers that no one should ever play. But away from the pumpkins and safety of light, 13 teenagers had no interest in fairy tales. They craved the kind of thrill that burned into memory. With bottles stolen from cellars and masks painted crudely in soot and ash, they left the warmth of Raven Hollow behind. Their boots carried them down the dirt road that bent into the forest, the world narrowing until all that remained was branch, wind, and the sound of their own breath. The harvest moon swelled above, sickly and orange, as though it had been stained by the blood of the earth. The woods received them like a cathedral of silence. Leaves, half-rotted and wet, clung to their shoes. The smell of moss and smoke pressed against their throats, and the further they ventured, the more it seemed the air thickened, as if crossing into a place that resented their intrusion. Still, they pressed forward, fueled by bravado, laughter ringing sharp against the trees. But their laughter died quickly, smothered by the forest stillness. They reached the clearing before midnight. It was circular, unnervingly perfect, as though carved by hands too steady to be human. The ground bore patches of blackened earth where no grass grew, scars from fires long extinguished. A crow, ragged and restless, burst from a nearby branch, cawing into the night before vanishing into the dark. It was then that unease began to eat at them, not enough to turn back, but enough to quiet their voices to whispers. One of the boys, older and eager to prove himself, carried a matchbox. With a flick, the flame trembled against the wind, fragile yet defiant. He lit the first candle within a hollowed gourd, its grinning face bleeding orange light into the clearing. One by one, the others followed suit, placing their pumpkins in a ring, a crooked imitation of ritual. Shadows writhed and lengthened across the clearing as if summoned by the fire itself. The game demanded 13 voices, and so they formed their circle. Each placed their offerings upon the soil. Bones taken from barns, bits of ash, fragments of things they should not have touched. The forest exhaled, the sound deep, groaning, as though the ground beneath them shifted in its sleep. Still, they did not falter. They raised their masks, hiding their faces, painting themselves as something less than human and more than prey. Together, their voices joined in the first verse of the chant. Words stitched together from whispers passed down, syllables that tasted like rust and smoke on their tongues. The circle of fire hissed alive, the chant growing stronger. And in that moment, none of them noticed the figure in the trees, watching, waiting. The chant had no beginning, no true end, only fragments of words carried down like heirlooms through restless tongues. No one in Raven Hollow claimed to know where it had first come from, yet everyone whispered that it was older than the town, older than the graves that lined its churchyard. The teenagers had heard it from brothers, sisters, cousins who had sworn to try it but never had. They laughed at the warnings. 13 voices, 13 flames, 13 offerings to call the 13th echo. A ghost, a trick, a story meant to frighten the weak. Or so they thought. The rules were simple, or so they believed. 13 must gather, each masked, for the mask stripped away the self, leaving only the vessel. Each must bring an offering, something burned, something broken, something taken from the bones of the earth. Once assembled, They were to form a circle, no gap permitted, and chant the words together in rhythm. If all was done correctly, the echo would rise from the hollow, drifting between them like a wandering flame. It would lay its hand upon one of them. The chosen was meant to carry the mark of the echo for a single year. Dreams soured into nightmares, shadows lengthened, whispers curling into their ears in empty rooms. A test of courage, nothing more. By the following Halloween, the echo would leave them. But the warnings came sharper than the rules. No voice could falter. No one could leave the circle. No flame could be extinguished. The number must remain 13 until the final verse was spoken. If the ritual fractured, if even one thread broke, then the echo would not choose. It would consume. The teenagers repeated the rules as if mocking them, testing their own nerves. They passed the bottles of liquor between their hands, warm liquid burning against the chill, masking their unease. One girl traced the cracked paint of her mask with shaking fingers, though she laughed when others noticed. They did not speak of fear, though it hung between them like frost on branches. The circle began again, voices rising, uneven but determined. The flames inside the gourds flickered and bowed, stretching long shadows that crawled like insects over their bodies. The syllables left their throats raw, tasting of copper and smoke. They tried to drown the shiver that moved through them, claiming it was nothing but the cold. Then one voice cracked. Only for a moment, a stutter, a slip of rhythm. A boy's throat caught on the word, choking the sound into silence before he forced it back out. A ripple ran through the group, a tremor not of sound but of the air itself. The fire dipped low, each candle flame curving unnaturally toward the dirt as though drawn down by invisible fingers. And then came another voice. Not one of theirs. It slithered from between the trees, deep and wet, repeating the chant with exact precision. Each syllable seemed to bleed into the night, vibrating against the bones in their chests. Masks turned in panic, but no one broke the circle. The 13th echo had arrived, though none had yet dared to invite it. The clearing pulsed with firelight, but the warmth never touched them. Instead, cold pressed against their ribs, as though invisible hands squeezed each breath from their lungs. They clung to the chant, voices rising in fevered desperation, but the 13th voice persisted, deep, slow, and rotten, carrying a cadence that did not belong to the living. Some of them turned their heads, masks scanning the tree line. The sound did not travel from one place but seemed to ooze from all directions at once, threading through branches, crawling under the soil, seeping into their very bones. The forest no longer stood still. Leaves shivered, though no wind stirred. The trunks gleamed as though wet bark weeping with dark resin. Shadows twisted between roots, forming grotesque shapes before melting back into the dark. A girl, her mask painted like a cracked skull, gasped. Her gourd lantern slipped from her trembling hands, tumbling into the dirt. The candle snuffed with a hiss. At once the air grew heavier, as if the forest itself leaned closer to listen. The circle shuddered, their voices faltering. Silence bled into the clearing, complete, suffocating. Even the fire stilled, its flames rigid and motionless, frozen in mid-flicker. Then came the sound, a shuffle, deliberate, from somewhere behind them. Not leaves crunching beneath boots, but something dragging across the soil, slow and patient. "Don't stop," one boy hissed, his voice cracking beneath the mask. He forced the chant back into rhythm, words stumbling from his lips like blood from a wound. Others followed, broken and uneven, their voices straining against the silence that seemed determined to swallow them whole. It was then that another boy, the youngest of the group, his mask painted with jagged teeth, stiffened. His eyes, barely visible through slits, widened. He pointed with a trembling hand. At the far edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of firelight, something stood. It looked at first like a scarecrow, a figure strung together with sticks and rags. Head bowed, arms dangling at unnatural angles. Yet its face, or the suggestion of one, glimmered pale in the dark, a grin too wide carved across shadow. The group froze, breath held captive in their throats, but in the space of a blink it was gone. Laughter spilled through the trees. Not bright, not human, but dry, rattling, as though air moved through an empty husk. The sound scattered around them, bouncing from branch to branch. Each mask turned, searching, but there was nothing there. The boy with the jagged mask felt it first. A hand, cold and damp, settled upon his shoulder. The weight of it seeped through fabric, through flesh, a grip too heavy for bone to bear. His body convulsed, breath choking into steam as his voice collapsed mid-chant. Every head turned toward him, 13 masks caught in firelight. Only 12 belonged to the living. The boy's scream shattered the chant like glass. It tore through the clearing, raw and jagged, echoing against the trees until it no longer sounded like a human voice, but the howl of something being dragged from the earth. Every mask turned toward him, the fire painting their hollowed faces in strokes of terror. His body lurched backward, the pale hand still pressed to his shoulder. Steam rose from beneath its grip, flesh blistering as though scorched by ice rather than flame. He clawed at the mask over his face, fingernails scraping desperate against painted wood, but the mask would not come free. His knees buckled. With a sickening crack, he collapsed to the soil, writhing like a fish torn from water. The circle held, unwilling, unable, as though the ground itself chained them in place. They strained against invisible weight, hearts thundering in their throats, watching helpless as their friend spasmed on the dirt. His mask split when it struck a stone, exposing half of his terrified face to the firelight. His eyes rolled back, whites shining slick with blood. From his throat came a sound no human mouth should have shaped, a churning, bubbling gurgle, as though the forest itself were speaking through him. Dark liquid spilled from his lips, thick and black, glistening like oil as it soaked into the earth. The scent of iron and rot swelled, sharp enough to sting the eyes. One girl, her mask painted with red streaks, tried to move forward, to break the circle. But the moment she lifted her foot, the fire flared violently, flames shooting skyward like the screams of 100 unseen mouths. Heat struck them in waves, forcing her back into place. The circle remained unbroken, though one of them already lay dying. The boy's body arched unnaturally, spine bending until it seemed it must snap. His fingers clawed into the soil, gouging deep furrows, and his scream rose to a pitch that cut through marrow. Then silence. His body dropped limp. His chest no longer rose. For a long moment, nothing stirred. Even the flames bent low, reduced to trembling blue tongues. The clearing held its breath, suffocated by the weight of his stillness. Their friend was gone, waxen and empty, face turned toward the fire as though it had hollowed him from within. But the circle remained 13, because where his body had fallen, another figure now stood. It was taller than the others, draped in rags that swayed though no wind stirred. Its mask was not painted but carved from wood, rotting and split with age. The mouth stretched into a grin too jagged, too deep, as though a blade had hacked it open. Its hollow sockets caught the firelight, reflecting no eyes within. None of the teenagers spoke. Their voices, their wills belonged to something else now, and still the chant continued. 13 voices again, though one of them belonged to the intruder. The circle was whole once more, but no longer theirs to claim. The 13th figure loomed inside the circle, its wooden mask jagged and grinning, its form draped in rags that stank of damp soil and old smoke. The air shifted the moment it appeared, pressing down with a weight that stole breath from their lungs. Though none of the teenagers wished to continue, their voices betrayed them, compelled to chant, syllables spilling from their throats in rhythm they could no longer resist. The game was no longer theirs. It belonged to the intruder. It moved slowly among them, one step at a time, the crunch of its weightless feet loud as thunder in their ears. The flames in the gourds bent toward it, tongues of fire straining like worshippers. Each time it passed behind one of them, the heat at their backs flared cold, and dread sank claws into their ribs. It touched them, not with warmth, not with flesh, but with something colder than stone. A brush of fingers across a shoulder, a graze along the curve of a throat, the brief weight of a palm against trembling hands. Where it touched, the skin grayed, veins blackened beneath the surface like roots strangling a dying tree. One boy's breath grew shallow, chest rattling with every exhale, but he could not move, could not scream. The others wanted to flee, but their bodies refused. Knees locked, jaws clenched, tongues writhing only to shape the chant. Their fear was contained, sealed within their masks, eyes streaming as smoke seared them raw. One girl, her mask painted white, streaked with jagged black, began to cry. The tears burned her cheeks, hot as acid, though her lips still moved in rhythm with the others. Her voice trembled, then broke. She begged, words spilling between chants, gasps swallowed by the rhythm she could not escape. "Please, I want to stop. Please." The intruder turned its wooden mask toward her. The grin caught the firelight, shadows filling the carved wound where a mouth should be. Her body stiffened as though shackled, her sobs silenced mid-breath. She felt it before she understood it, soil filling her lungs, dry and heavy, pressing into her chest from within. Her eyes bulged as the invisible weight crushed her ribs. The others saw her convulse, her lantern slipping from her hands, candle tumbling to the earth. But this time the flame did not go out. It grew. The small spark roared into a jet of black fire, hissing upward, twisting into shapes that resembled writhing limbs. She collapsed, mask cracking against the dirt, her final breath a sharp whistle, cut off before it became a scream. For a moment, silence again. Only the fire snapped, spitting ash into the night. 12 stood. One lay dead, her eyes wide, staring without focus, mouth open as if still trying to plead. And yet the chant persisted. Not 12 voices, 13. Because the intruder had bent over her body, its mask lowered close, as though tasting her final breath. When it rose again, the circle was once more complete. The clearing was no longer a place of earth and roots, but a crucible of torment. The circle had become a prison, and within it, death moved like a tide. The intruder lingered among them, its mask forever grinning, its wooden grin stretching deeper each time it passed. And the chant continued, not chosen, not spoken of their own will, but dragged from their throats as if by hooks buried in their tongues. One boy fell first, collapsing without sound. His mask split as his body struck the dirt, limbs jerking as though strings had been cut. The intruder did not pause. It drifted past, its rags whispering like dry leaves, and another voice faltered. A girl shrieked once before her mouth filled with flame, skin blistering as though she had swallowed fire whole. She dropped to her knees, her body blackening, the smell of scorched flesh curling into the air. The others could not look away, though their minds screamed too. The forest itself had joined the ritual. Branches bent inward, bending and groaning until they formed a canopy like ribs overhead. The ground pulsed beneath their feet, soil bulging as if something beneath sought to claw its way out. Shadows lengthened and twisted, weaving into grotesque shapes, hands too long, faces too thin, mouths that gaped wider than skulls should allow. The air throbbed with whispers, not only from the intruder now but from the trees themselves, their groaning indistinguishable from laughter. Another boy collapsed mid-chant. His chest caved inward, ribs splintering with a sound like breaking branches. Blood streamed from his mouth, pooling into the dirt before being sucked down as though the earth were drinking it. His lantern flared bright, then shattered, shards burning until they vanished into smoke. The others dropped in quick succession. One was seized by unseen hands, dragged into the soil until only her mask remained above ground. Another burst into choking sobs before her throat tore open, voice spilling into silence forever. One by one, the circle withered, each death stranger, crueler than the last, as though the intruder savored inventing new torments for each victim. By the time 11 had fallen, silence claimed the clearing. Only one remained, the girl who had dropped her lantern first. Her mask hung cracked across her face, its paint smeared by tears. Soot streaked down her cheeks. She trembled, her body screaming to flee, yet her feet remained rooted to the ground. Around her, 12 bodies lay in perfect symmetry, arranged by unseen hands into a flawless ring. Each face was turned toward the center, mouths frozen in silent screams. The intruder stood opposite her, mask tilted, firelight carving its grin into something infinite. The black flames in the center of the circle surged taller, twisting like a column of writhing bodies. she whispered, broken, asking what it wanted, what it had taken from them. The intruder lowered its mask, the hollow sockets locking onto her gaze, and though its mouth never moved, a voice carved itself directly into her mind. "I want your silence." Her scream split the night, then stopped, cut short as if the sound had been swallowed whole. Dawn broke slowly over Raven Hollow, but no light reached the clearing in the woods. The forest was hushed, heavy, as though it had witnessed too much in the night and dared not speak of it. Where 13 teenagers had gathered, only remnants remained. Ash, scattered bones, fragments of masks split and charred. No bodies, no blood, no trace of life at all, except for the faint outline of a circle carved into the soil, etched as if by claws dragged deep into the earth. When the parents began to search, they did not speak openly of what they feared. They called out their children's names through the trees, voices trembling, their lanterns swinging weakly in the mist. But their calls came back empty, swallowed by a silence so thick it felt deliberate. The sheriff organized searches, combing the woods, dogs barking wildly before refusing to cross certain patches of ground. What they found never filled the hole: a torn sneaker, a cracked mask, a lantern burned black on the inside. The rest was gone, as though the forest itself had swallowed the children whole. The town tried to bury it. Records were sealed, newspapers mysteriously went missing, and those who asked too many questions found themselves whispered about in church pews and behind locked doors. Officially, the 13 were listed as missing, but those who had lived in Raven Hollow long enough knew the truth. That missing was not the same as gone, because every October 31st, the woods stirred again. Locals told of seeing jack-o'-lanterns flickering deep in the trees where no hand had placed them, their grins wide, smoke curling from their mouths. Others swore they heard voices faint and broken, chanting in unison. Sometimes, on nights when the harvest moon swelled too large, children swore they saw figures standing in the fields, scarecrows with masks painted in ash, heads tilted toward the forest. By the late 1990s, Raven Hollow had adopted rituals of its own. No one left their homes after dusk on Halloween. Pumpkins were extinguished before midnight, curtains drawn tight. Parents locked doors, whispering the same warning to their children: "Do not answer if the chant begins." For some nights, the whispers were faint. A trick of the wind, they said, a memory playing in the dark. But other nights, the chant rose clear, 13 voices threading through the air, and some swore they recognized them. The laughter of their lost children now hollow, the sobs of their friends cut short into silence. Voices both familiar and estranged, echoing endlessly. The clearing still waits. Each year on October 31st, something stirs there. Ash stings the air, flames hiss where no spark should burn, and the trees seem to bend closer, remembering. The legend has become the marrow of Raven Hollow, a curse passed to each new generation like an heirloom no one can destroy. They say the echo is patient. It waits for 13 to gather once more, and when the circle closes, when the chant begins again, it will finish what it started. And if you wander too close on Halloween night, if you follow the sound of a match striking in the dark, you may find your voice joining theirs before you even realize you're speaking. The woods are waiting. The chant is waiting, and the silence will take you too.